Dear students, welcome to episode 2 of lecture 11 on the WBGU's recommendations for research and education. We now have the chance to ask Professor Leinfelder a few questions on his lecture. Thank you for this wonderful lecture, Professor Leinfelder. I had a few questions, and the first would be if you could differentiate between the 4 types, the transformation research and education and transformative research and education, and give just a brief example because I'm not quite sure I completely understood it yet.
Okay, so what I was trying to develop is that we need research and education to manage this transformation, and this is twofold. So there is one major question is, can we do it? How can we do it? I mean, do we have the capacities, the mental capacities? Is society ready for this? Can we learn? Can we learn from the past and so forth? Can we do the transformation as a whole? We study the transformation as such. This is transformation research, and we need education for that. Also, everyone has to ask, am I ready for this, and why do we need this, and so forth. This is the education to this transformation research. Whereas transformative research is then sort of accompanying the process. I mean, the actions, we have technologies, but often the technologies are developed just in a certain sector. Take biofuels, and the example which we gave in the previous lecture here. And so we have to think about the side effects. We have to think, is this all considered in a systemic view? We have to think, how can we push important things and so forth? Where are the acceptance barriers and so forth? So, for instance, if you decide to help transformation by changing your eating behavior, so that would be based on transformative education. You know you can help transformation in this way. I hope these examples were appropriate.
It is. Okay, I think I understand better. So it's on the can and on the how.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. That's the easiest way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. And this whole lecture series reflected on the new social contract for sustainability.
Yeah.
And can you say a few things about how this social contract impacts on research?
Yes. So a researcher wants to be free. There is basic research, there's applied research, but I think this kind of different systems, they are also fusing more in the sense that we have to do research for transformation. A scientist sits not alone in his ivory tower any longer, and it's also not enough if you give like advices to politics to say, this is what the science knows, do something with it. So it's up to you that you do something, whatever. So the whole process of doing science and legitimizing it and then telling it to the society will be an iterative one. So there are two. We have to say we don't know this yet, but we could do it in this way, and you have the decisions to be done here, or we have to say if you make this decision, if you want to follow this pathway, our research says that you have, like almost playing chess, that you have these side effects here, and if you take another pathway, you have other side effects. So it's much more on the dialogue basis, and scientists also will have to learn that they, at least when they work in this field, they cannot be only free here, so they have to help the transformation. So there's also more responsibility on the researchers.
Okay. And so this is the research side, but the research has to be funded. And you were talking about that one of the main points was to prioritize this funding of research. Yeah. But this is a highly political issue in itself, no?
Well, of course, we are not saying that all the other research is not necessary. We also need everything what we do right now. We want to understand the world, point, full stop. That is really the basic question of science and humanities. But we need a larger proportion of colleagues dealing with transformation research. That's what we are saying. And for this, we have to, we think that there have to be frameworks, there have to be more funding for certain things. Sometimes it's even enough. I mean, the example of Germany shows that a lot of things are already on the run. Here there are lots of good things being done on Earth system science and so forth, but things have to be upscaled, and sometimes it's too disseminated. So somebody is doing things here, another colleague is doing it there, and they maybe don't speak so much with each other because the incentives are not so high. Why should I, as a natural scientist, cooperate with humanities? What does my dean have from it? Also, there are questions like this. So I think if you change these things, and this doesn't cost really much money often, if you change these things, this is already pushing things forwards towards a better research possibility for the transformation.
And this is this interdisciplinarity you were talking about, to have these shared issues, and also the transdisciplinarity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And another parallel you made was an avalanche of innovation when you were talking about the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine. And I was wondering if it's possible to say what is the innovation in this great transformation that will create this avalanche.
Yeah, that's a problem, because what is the major innovation we normally only know later on when we look back a little bit. There are a couple of other innovations. I just mentioned the power engines, steam engines, and so forth. There are a couple of other innovations like the electric bulb, which turned out to be very, very important. And I think one of the major innovations in the process also for somehow handling this transformation is communication. Book printing press has been invented a long time ago, but now there is the internet. So of course we do need this for global discussions, for flow of knowledge and so forth. We also need new technologies now, whether solar energy or wind power or still other things to come turn out to be the key innovations. Only time will tell. But we know enough that we know that we do need these innovations, and we do have to provide a field through research, through funding, that if we have them, they can develop at full speed. It would be wrong to hope that the major innovation will only come. Maybe we have it already. That's why we have to provide this framework for development. It would be wrong to wait, because we might wait too long and then the planetary boundaries just burst everywhere.
That wouldn't be fun.
That wouldn't be fun, yes. And there's also no need to wait, because we have enough of technologies really here, and we know that it's more in the mind of the society that we still have to come forward, but technologies are there in principle, so we know how to do it on a technical way. The challenge is to have this implemented in society, in governments, in civilians and so forth. And now you just mentioned civil society. You were talking about the participative monitoring, and you were showing this triangle where participation could occur. But when I was looking at that, it felt a bit to me like research would ask for people to participate. And I was wondering if it could also go the other way around, that civil society can also help direct the research agenda, and how you see the role of civil society, if it's only something who responds to stimuli, or? No. I mean, what would be wrong if we do something, we decide things, and then ask for participation, sort of, please accept what we already provide here. And this is not what we mean. We want participation for legitimation of research and respective suggestions and so forth. There's a lot of activity, just to name a few, bird watching, bat watching, and so people do this. NGOs do a lot of things here, but this is not always or often not connected with science. So these are independent developments, sometimes because they want to control what politics do and this and that. So what we say is, let's fuse this, let's integrate this. So there is this development already, and people are ready to do things like that. And science is a fascinating thing, and it's all kind of, I mean, it's what we learn from childhood to try and find out why this works like this and what is this and what is that. So everybody has this implemented, I believe, to some extent. And so there are many people who are really willing to do that. And if it's just a small step coming away from what is quite widespread, from event-based participation, which does not necessarily or not really legitimize research or the way or explains the way we research. We have to make this permanently, and I think the fusion is relatively easy of all those who are willing to do that. They are there, as long as the scientists open for this. Sometimes the scientists don't want that because they say, well, we don't want to be controlled, or they say, no, the methods we can use for participative projects are too simplistic, which is not the case. They can be relatively simple, but they can still be scientific.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so in this participation, you mentioned a lot of people who are already doing things mm-hmm. and just need to be integrated in a bigger system. Mm-hmm. But what about people who think really otherwise of these issues, that mm-hmm. have very different perceptions, for whom mm-hmm. This transformation is not important? Yes. How do you include them in this model of participation?
Well, the only solution here is the education matter. I mean, as long as you don't know that they didn't have a chance to learn that actions you do now may have a long-lasting impact for the future and might really deteriorate the life of your own future generations here. As long as they don't have a chance to learn this, they might not change in their mind. So of course this is a democratic process here, and it will probably not be the case that each and everyone is suddenly from one day to the other be convinced. So this is a long-lasting task to implement transformation research, the concept of the Anthropocene and so forth, sustainability in the education. There also we have to change many things because teachers, we have subjects in schools, they are very sectoral, and of course topics like climate change, like transformation, they should be tackled by very different subjects already in the school curriculum. You can do on climate change in physics, in chemistry, in biology, in social sciences, even in arts and so forth. And I think that's the way to make it also interesting, to interest pupils and anybody else for this kind, for the importance of these topics.
And also, don't you think there's a problem of trust in science? Because you say now you need education, yes. But yes. What if people don't trust the science?
Yeah, so I think it's not enough to do what we call public understanding of science and humanities. Here are the results and they are great and we discovered something new and the world will change in this direction. We have to do more on public understanding of research. So it's more important that people understand how we do research rather than what we come up with. Because if once you're convinced that they are not crazy, that they are responsible people in what they are doing and how they are doing it, you don't have to mistrust any result which comes up. I think that's the level where you have to start, and that's why participation again is so important. If you can experience that you can be part of the research system in the way how one does science, I think this gives you trust in science, which cannot be abused, of course, by the scientists.
Yeah. And you were talking about creation of new programs, new study programs. Mm-hmm. There are already many choices mm-hmm. out yes. there. Why should we have new ones? Okay, so we have in Europe at least the Bologna process. That means we can combine modules within the studies in an easier way than we used to do. We could do it in former times. This is, I think, already helpful for combining existing modules to something new, but the problem is there are not so many incentives as yet here, even for studying it. Why should you study one subject and another subject to it, and then you have to go relatively deep in all, and then you don't know whether you get a job in that here. But again, thinking
historically, there was the Industrial Revolution, and before that, there was no profession like an engineer. So this just came up with the Industrial Revolution, with the transformation into the industry area. And so I think what we could need is also something like, let's call it a transformateur or something like this. So that's why we say, besides all the other things which can be bundled in different ways here, so that existing modules can be combined to help to create courses helping transformation, why not think even further and say, no, at least to some extent, not that everybody has to do this, but to some extent this would be really necessary for such an important topic, that we have a profession which focuses on the systemic views of systems, be it in humanities or in natural sciences, and to fuse this together. Time will tell whether this will work on. The first step will be certainly to bundle what we have already, but I think the topic is so important that our suggestion to come up with certain business schools in this direction, and maybe even with dedicated universities who have then subjects which all help transformation research and transformative research. I think this is an important thing to do, and in a country, a nation who does this first, I think has also an advantage to be on the forefront of this kind of new research.
And in a way, this lecture series, this whole lecture series, presented us and the students with a whole range of insights on this transformation. So it's just the doing of this lecture series is a kind of transformation education, and also transformative education, no?
It's good if you see it that way. Then that means it would be a successful lecture course.
Well, let's hope so. And this is my last question, actually. You are a geologist. And you are involved in policy advice. You've been talking to us about democracy in some previous lecture, and today you were talking about education and communication. How did you get there?
Well, this is a quite personal story, but I believe I'm not the only one who thinks like this. When I studied geology and I did paleontology and so forth, I loved to do that. But I always had that question inside myself, is it so important for the world that I'm studying so-and-so critters here, extinct and everything? So out of my own, I had that urge to tell the public what we are doing there. So I was relatively early in public outreach programs and so forth. And then it turned out that my job was connected with scientific collections then later on. And so I went to the museum business and so forth. And of course then telling the public, but then also giving suggestions of things where you think you have to be changed is a natural process, and this was important for me, and I think that shift from geology to biology to science communication to the public and now also to political advising is coherent. It doesn't look like, but it's coherent. The bad thing is maybe that I could do this only step by step, because first you have to have a career in natural sciences, and then you can change and so forth. What we need now to push up this process is that a young student like you can already choose to combine different things like this, so that the full image already is created at a much earlier stage of life.
Well, dear students, this was the last interview of the last lecture of this course. I hope you enjoyed it, and we wish you the best of luck on your exams, on your way to become a transformator. Thank you.
Thank you.